Hi friends, I'm Pastor Terry Lee. We are Okotoks Alliance Church, and this is the 10-Minute Coach. I want to give you a little leg up into the subject of heaven. We as a church family have been in a series we've been calling A Whole New World, and this past Sunday I preached the fourth message in that series, which we were looking at the question of heaven. Now the preceding messages have all been about the resurrection, initially the resurrection of Jesus, and then our resurrection hope, all of that taken from 1 Corinthians chapter 15. When we step into the subject of heaven, there's not really one passage of scripture that I wanted to camp on. I rather wanted to try to give us a bit of an overview. There's lots of folklore around the idea of heaven, and next week we're going to talk about hell. Lots of folklore around this, and can we sort of sift away some of the imaginations of previous generations, some of the infiltration of other world religions, so that we have a clear picture of what the scriptures actually tell us about the subject of heaven. So with that in mind, we went through a ton of scriptures. There are lots more that we could go to in order to help you out with your personal study or your life group study or your family gathered around the dinner table. On the back of our sermon notes, which you can download from the website, free, are some questions. Let's see, that's a little overexposed, and it looks like I'm not going to be able to get the camera to recognize it. There we go. There are links in this for the passages of scripture, which should make it super easy. So it's really worthwhile downloading the PDF file, because on the back of this, or the second page of the PDF file, there are links that will take you straight to the passages of scripture that we're talking about. And so the message on Sunday went through kind of four short points. Firstly, the word heaven, we use it in different ways. The scriptures use it in different ways. We want to pay attention to what way is it being used so that we don't abuse it or misuse it or misunderstand what's being said. And then we kind of moved into, well, where do we go when we die? I don't think I used this term, but we're talking there about what scholars refer to as the intermediate state. And it's this idea that the resurrection of our bodies and our physical resurrection to be with Christ, a couple of weeks from now we'll talk about the new heaven and the new earth, that is a secondary stage in the afterlife. That is the life after death. So the life after death part is what's called the intermediate state. And this is what Jesus was talking about in the Gospels when he was being crucified, and he said, "Today you will be with me in paradise," as he spoke to the one thief on the cross. That was an immediacy, that was a personal closeness. Let me also say that it speaks strongly against an idea that is out there that is soul sleep, and that's an idea that, that takes literally the language when Jesus says, we sleep in death. A couple of places in the New Testament where it says that. Well, that's just a euphemism for death. And here, when Christ says, "You will be with me in paradise," it is a conscious, living reality with Jesus that we are invited into, but it is a disembodied reality. So spirit separated from soul. That's probably what Paul's talking about in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, when he says we long, he's talking about the tent, the first part of it, our bodies, he likens it to a tent, a fragile, temporary structure that is what we're looking forward to, a permanent structure that God has for us. And there's some language in there that some scholars see in there, the sort of the inference or the allusion to this intermediate state, this idea that there will be a period when we are not embodied, but then when Christ returns and consummates the age and then ushers in the final judgment, we will be clothed with our resurrection body and returned to a physical state that is a super spiritual state. We discussed that last Sunday. I gave you a number of the passages of scripture here on this that I referenced, Deuteronomy 4:36. Actually, I didn't even reference that in the sermon, but the idea of heaven as the dwelling place of God. So as opposed to the heavens, as in the cosmos, or the heavens as in the sky around us, the heaven as the place of God's dwelling is really what we're talking about here. And with that in mind, then we would say, well, anywhere that God is heaven, or the place that he dwells is heaven. Well, that kind of provokes a question. In what sense is heaven among us now? If God is with me, he indwells me by his Spirit. So just be careful. We're trying to understand something that is so far and beyond us. I think we want to be really careful with the language that we use. However, I think there is something to that, in that scholars talk about us engaging in the already and the not yet. That with the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, the kingdom of heaven was, in fact, it was coming in the days of Jesus. With his death, burial, and resurrection, it was inaugurated, it was begun. We are living in this kingdom of heaven period, but it is going to be consummated, it is going to be completed, it is going to be fully realized with the second coming of Christ. So there's a sense in which we get a taste of heaven now, but we are looking for it fully then. I love the language that C.S. Lewis uses in the Problem of Pain is the name of the book. The final chapter in it is called Heaven. Pardon me. And he says, there have been times when I think I do not desire heaven, but more often I find myself wondering whether in our heart of hearts we have ever desired anything else. All things that have ever deeply possessed your soul have been hints of it, tantalizing glimpses, promises never quite fulfilled, echoes that died away just as they caught your ear. It's this like, I've just, almost, and then it's gone. And it's like, I almost experienced it there. Well, he suggests that's the foretaste of what is to come. So I've asked some questions here that I think are self-explanatory, and I just invite you to kind of work that through devotionally. And then maybe let me say there are lots of popular representations available out there about heaven. I touched on things like the person that had an afterlife or that had a near-death experience that came back with a tale of bright lights and such. Those can be inspiring stories and certainly heartwarming stories. I would caution you, they're stories. They are prone. There have been some instances where it's been demonstrated that it was hoodwinkery. It was not true. Other cases where we just don't know what they experienced. So be careful of that. And then I would also say be careful of some of the popularizations of this. We don't know everything. N.T. Wright in Surprised by Hope, a book that he wrote, he suggests that everything that we have in the pages of Scripture, everything that we experience in the book of creation, so the book of Scripture as opposed to the book of creation, God's revealed himself in both clearly in the Scriptures, clearly but prone to misunderstanding in nature. Everything that God has revealed about him, about the afterlife, is really just like a sign pointing to your destination. And as inadequate as the sign is to thoroughly communicate what the destination is, so too are the pages of Scripture inadequate to thoroughly help us understand what that is. Dr. David Jeremiah is a popular pastor, very prolific author. He puts it into something that's called, this is a little book called Discover Paradise. And it's kind of a guidebook. It's a guidebook to heaven, your true home. And this is not really an endorsement of the book. My mom gave this to me. It's cute. It's interesting. And he takes things that in the pages of Scripture. So the one thing would be that he takes things in the pages that are in the pages of Scripture, I think are supposed to be representative, like the signs that point to, as opposed to literal, especially in stuff that we find in the book of Revelation. We've got these grand images. So are we really going to walk on streets of gold? Is the gate into heaven really made of one pearl? Well, maybe, but that language is found in a book that is full of beasts with multiple heads and all kinds of language that I believe we're supposed to take figuratively. It's language that's supposed to kind of awaken our imagination and help us feel more than be a literal communication of what will be. Here's what I take a huge encouragement in, is that whatever we imagine, like the best we imagine of what will be, whether it's streets of gold or pearly gates or the feast at the end of days. Heaven is going to be so much more than that, so much better than that. One of the things I love about what Dr. Jeremiah does here is to just say, God is so exciting. How could eternity be anything but an absolute amazing ride with God? So that's maybe enough to give you a little provocation into some further study coming out of the message this past Sunday, April 25, 2021. I'm Pastor Terry Lee. We are Okotoks Alliance Church, and this has been the 10-Minute Coach. Bless you, and bye for now.